So, the reason I got this and this is actually because of this. So, let's talk about all of these things. We are reviewing the Doors 1967 to 1971 Rhino High Fidelity box set, which just came out and unfortunately is sold out. But we also will be talking about the Doors Live in Detroit box set 4LP set that just came out for Record Store Day 2024 Black Friday, and I'm very excited about both of these things. It pretty much completes all of my Doors collection on vinyl. Let's get right into all of this and what you get with this box set and what you get with this box set. Starting with this box set, this is released by Rhino Records, and this is pressed by Kevin Gray, and these are AAA copies of the entire Doors studio catalog with Jim Morrison. So some people were asking and mentioning that there are two other records out there with the Doors, but this is only with Jim Morrison in this set, as you'll see from 67 to 71. These are numbered, and each one of the individual records is numbered to match the outer box on the set. In my set, my number is 918. All of these jackets are very awesome gatefold jackets, as we've seen with all of the Rhino High Fidelity sets. You also get very cool inlays with each one of the records, just like they've done with all the previous Rhino High Fidelities, that has pictures of the master tapes and a write-up of each one of the albums, which is very cool. Also, if any of the records had any artwork or extra inlays or anything like that, they've included those as well. Like LA Woman has an inlay. These are beautiful stout and tip-on jackets, and it's very cool too that each one of them in the box set also still comes with the OB strip too that you get with the Rhino High Fidelity records. Now, when this came out from Rhino Records, it actually did not sell out super fast right away. I mean, it sold out after a couple of days, but I was able to get it that morning. Rhino Records website did not crash, and I ordered it, and within 2 days it showed up at my house. And I was lucky enough, none of the records are damaged. You're going to see there's a couple of slight warps in this, but nothing crazy that I'm going to go back and send back for. I do have one issue with one of the records that we're going to see later on, but the outer box came totally fine. And if you were lucky enough to get this outer box is beautiful. I mean, it is very nice. This snakeskin feel to it is very cool. It's very premium, and we do have like a lot of gold embossing as well as the gold numbering and the Rhino High Fidelity logo on the back. I feel like for the people that wanted to get this, they definitely had a chance to. I think it was still available until Black Friday, and by Black Friday it definitely sold out. As cool as it is, let's talk more about the vinyl. Now, as we get into these, I am not really looking at the most audiophile pressing of these records. I know that there are the analog production 45 RPM editions out there, and I'm sure that they sound amazing. Although I have heard Mike from the In Groove compare these with those, and he actually prefers a lot of these, except for a couple of the tracks on this one, to those. I will say for me, when it comes to the Doors and when it comes to this situation in this box set, I was not getting this specifically for the audiophile nature of it. The audiophile nature of it, for the fact that these Rhino High Fidelities are pressed by Kevin Gray, AAA copies, that was something that enticed me and brought me to the table. And the addition of these amazing jackets and the OB strips, all of it together, combined with the fact that I could get all 6 records in one go, was my main reason for going after these. I've never owned any of the Doors records on vinyl except for this best of, and I actually have a couple different copies of this best of, and it's one of the first records that I actually ever got when I ever started collecting vinyl. And this best of is basically very similar to this best of, which is literally the very first thing that I ever got into the Doors with. And this was actually stolen from my older brother. Thank you, Tony. When I was like, I don't know, in middle school or something like that. I still have it to this day, and all the CDs are still in here and everything. But I wore the crap out of this best of. I usually do not get into best of records. In fact, I hate greatest hits or best of, and I try not to get into them too much. But this was one that I got into when I was like 12 years old, and this really got me into the Doors. As you're going to see too, this really got me into the Doors. This is the Doors from Oliver Stone with Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison, and Meg Ryan's in this as well. And I, again, wore the crap out of this VHS, and it's one of the few VHSs that still made it along to my collection that I still have today, and I'm very glad that I do. But A lot of people probably don't like this movie, and a lot of people probably think that, you know, these best ofs are crap or whatever, but I don't care. I was 12 years old, and this was my first introduction to Jim Morrison and to the Doors. So a lot of my opinions and a lot of my feelings about the band and a lot of my conceptions about the band really do come from this. And I know that that's probably not correct. I know that Oliver Stone probably took a lot of liberties in this movie. If you've never seen this movie, I highly recommend it. I think it's a very good movie, and I think that Val Kilmer does a great job of playing Jim Morrison in this. But we'll get back to this a little bit more when we're talking about the Live in Detroit, because I think that they have a lot to do with each other. Specifically, the Live in Detroit show is like, I feel like it's featured very prominently in this movie. So we'll get back to this in a minute. This is The Doors, self-titled, originally released in 1967. And this is probably one of the greatest debut albums ever from a band. There are so many awesome hits on this. I mean, it basically plays like a greatest hits record. You have Break On Through, you have Light My Fire, you have The End. It's interesting that Light My Fire is the last song on side one, because I know that a lot of times when it comes to like audiophile recording and things like that, you usually want to put your best tracks in the beginning of the grooves and usually the softer tracks in the end of the grooves. For me, a lot of the inner tracks of these records are the ones that I remember the most, like Crystal Ship and Soul Kitchen, and also End of the Night. I can just like, I hear that song like over and over and over again when I think about this first self-titled record. But my all-time favorite track on this record is Backdoor Man. I feel like that track is a quintessential Doors track. And as you go through the entire catalog of this band, you get that sound more and more. And I feel like that sound is what rises to the top. But also that track is just, I mean, it's got a lot of funk in it too. I mean, like the Doors had some funk in them. They had some groove in them, man. But Backdoor Man is my favorite track on this record. So how does this sound? Again, like I just mentioned here, I'm not coming at this comparing 57 different versions of this record. I don't own the 45s, and I don't own like whatever that $1,000 copy was. I don't even have the Vinyl Me Please version of this. There is a Vinyl Me Please, I think, brown version with a 45, and I think that's actually a completely different cut than this cut and then other cuts that have been out there. So this is definitely awesome. Break On Through on this, the first track, as soon as it starts up, the percussion. So if you're not familiar, I am a percussionist, and a lot of my first goings of playing music had to do with playing Nirvana and the Doors. Dave Grohl and John Densmore were both like huge influences on me, and mainly because of that Doors movie, I got really into John Densmore, who oddly enough is played by Kevin Dillon. Again, we'll get more back into that movie. This is a fantastic sounding record. This has a very low noise floor. I will say that this is one of the ones out of my bunch that is slightly warped. It's a little bit dish warped on side one, so I have to use my record clamp on it, but other than that, it's totally fine, and there are no pops or clicks on this whole record. The End sounds fantastic on this. I was listening to it kind of like in the dark and just zoning out and just remembering so many great moments of my high school years and growing up and learning how to play music, and this album and this band had a lot to do with a lot of that stuff. The next one out of the box is Strange Days, also released in 1967. And again, this was the Doors just beaming with creativity right when they get signed as a band. So they have so much material. Both the previous album and this album probably could have all been in one single double album situation, but smartly enough, they released them as two albums. And this is also another masterpiece record from them. This record has a couple of my all-time favorite tracks from the Doors on it, specifically Strange Days and Moonlight Drive and When the Music's Over. I mean, again, both the last record and this one play for me like greatest hits. Almost all of these records play like greatest hits. It's not really until we get to the Soft Parade as we're going to see that there are even any Doors tracks that I'm not into. I love pretty much every single track on this record. And again, this one sounds amazing as well. When the Music's Over sounds so good, but I will say the one issue that I have in this entire box set in terms of audio fidelity comes in on When the Music's Over, which totally sucks because it's one of my favorite tracks, and it's the last track on this record, and it's literally the last moment where it's till the end. Literally, I get unscratch till the end, and I've cleaned this thing twice ultrasonically with the Humming Guru Nova. I've also checked it for, static or whatever. I've checked my stylus. I've tried it on 2 different records. There's definitely some little, gash that happens right in that silence, in that rest of the music. And it kills me every time because it totally takes me out of the music. There's only like 6 more bars or whatever left of the music at that point, and all I'm thinking about is that scratch and like, should I go buy another copy of this just to replace it in my box set? But like I said, other than that, this entire thing sounds amazing, but unfortunately, this is my one copy out of the whole set that has any issues with it, and it's just that one little part. The third record from The Doors, Waiting for the Sun, originally released in 1968. Now, this one, some people I've read in reviews say that they took a sophomore slump with this record, and I could not disagree more. In fact, this is one of my favorite Doors records, and it has some of my all-time favorite Doors tracks on it. Specifically 5 to 1, Spanish Caravan, and Not to Touch the Earth. But like I said, as I was growing up and learning about the Doors and collecting these records, in these first 3 records for me played like greatest hits, and it was like I love every single track on all of these records. This is one of those weird albums, like Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy versus Physical Graffiti, where Waiting for the Sun, the track Waiting for the Sun, is not actually on this record. Apparently the band really liked the name Waiting for the Sun, and they were starting to work out the track, but they didn't have it fully fleshed out yet, so they opted not to put it on the record, so it doesn't come out until later on, as we'll see. This cover is great. I love this picture, and on this gatefold jacket is just beautiful, and you get this awesome lizard print on the inside of it. And Not to Touch the Earth, it's one of those songs that really stuck with me from the movie, as we're going to see later when we talk more about the movie in a minute. But that song really stuck with me in the movie, and the movie was the first time I ever heard it. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of live versions of Not to Touch the Earth out there too. I think it might be on Absolutely Live. It's not on the Live in Detroit, but I love that track on this record. Sonically, I'm just going to put it out there. This entire box set sounds amazing. The noise floor on this is almost non-existent at all. The mastering on this record is so good. The strings and the percussion that comes in, I guess it's not really strings. I guess it's like the organ or whatever it is. Like the things in Wintertime Love or in Unknown Soldier. All of the silent moments in this that need to be silent just sound amazing. So if you've never heard a really crisp version of this record on vinyl, this is definitely one to go get. And I would say that you're probably going to pay a good price to get an extremely mint clean copy of, a 60s original or something like that. So this pressing is amazing. So I would definitely highly recommend it when they come out individually to go at least pick up this one because it sounds really, really good. Now we get into The Doors' Soft Parade, which was originally released in 1969. And for me, anyways, this is probably my most unexplored Doors record. I know for a lot of people, this is definitely the least popular Doors record. And I know because of this movie, I definitely had a very sour taste about this record in my head. Although there were some very interesting things about this record that happened while Jim Morrison was making this record that came up into play in my personal life at sometimes, but we won't get into that stuff. I never really enjoyed a lot of this record when I was a teenager growing up. I definitely was not into hearing a lot of the horn sections. This introduces a lot of horns and brass along with the band, and they were trying a lot of different things and going in a completely different direction in this record, and I don't think that they hit a lot of their high marks on this. Although I will say, sonically, this record sounds amazing. Like, this is definitely one of their better recorded records, and according to Mike from the In-Groove, this is in his top 100 analog pressings of all time. I will say, listening to it now and having more of an open mind on things as an adult, and even just understanding more about, record production and where the band was going with this and what they were at least trying to do, I've come to appreciate this record a lot more now. And I've listened to it a few times for this review. In fact, I probably listened to this more than I listened to all the others because I was so unfamiliar with this music and I wanted to really get a feel for this. I will say this. If you've ever seen this movie, they cut portions of the Soft Parade with, I believe, Val Kilmer singing it. And the sound and what they did in that movie actually sounds a lot cooler, in my opinion, than what is actually on this record. And maybe that's blasphemous for me to say that or whatever. The Soft Parade is one of the better tracks on this record. Touch Me is obviously the big hit from this record and one that's gotten played the most on like classic rock stations. I feel like I heard that a billion times on 1029 in Philadelphia. But the rest of the record really does not have any other hits on it. I do think that side 2 is definitely the strongest side on this record. I think that anytime there's a voice other than Jim Morrison, it is such a stark change for this band, which is also another reason why later on when they lose Jim Morrison, those records I don't think work very well, or at least I wasn't a big fan of them when I listened to them. And I only recently just even found out that they even existed. They recorded 2 other records after Jim Morrison passed away. But the Soft Parade is not the best out of the park moment for the Doors. As I said before, the first 3 albums are all like greatest hits for me, but this is the first one where we've got some misses on the horizon here, but they definitely rectify that with the next one. Now we get into what, in my opinion, and I say this is my favorite Doors record. When I was growing up and the first time I ever heard Morrison Hotel and the first time I ever saw this record cover, I love this album cover. I think it's one of the best album covers. I think it's so awesome that they found a random hotel somewhere labeled Morrison Hotel. I'm sure there's probably a big story about all that. And there are extra photos of this in the inlays of this, which is really cool. But again, having it on this beautiful gatefold jacket from Rhino Records is just amazing. And this record really gets the band back into sounding like the Doors. And in my opinion, this and LA Woman are really where the Doors was like maturing and going. And I mean, it sucks that that they burned so fast and so hard and just went out so quickly. But this record has so many great tracks on it. Again, we get Waiting for the Sun on this one. They started writing that song on Waiting for the Sun sessions, and then they skipped Soft Parade and didn't even put it on there because it didn't really fit that record. So it fits on this record. Very awesome. And it is one of the best tracks on this record. And sonically on this cut, it just sounds so good. All of the strings and all of the hard percussion moments that, I mean, again, I'm a percussionist, so a lot of this record has some really standout moments from John Densmore on it. You also have other tracks too, like Roadhouse Blues, Peace Frog, Indian Summer, Queen of the Highway. This, again, gets me back to the Doors' greatest hits, basically. Like, I love every track on this record. What's interesting is, growing up listening to this best of, the only 2 tracks that even make it off of this album are Roadhouse Blues and Waiting for the Sun. And I gotta say, I like a lot of the other tracks on this record so much more. I mean, Roadhouse Blues is one of the greatest Doors tracks of all time, but I really love this record. This is one of my favorite Doors records, probably my favorite Doors record, but it definitely comes very close to the next one. And now we get into the band's final record with Jim Morrison, and to a lot of people, the pinnacle or the highlight or the greatest moment of the Doors, which is LA Woman. And this is one of the band's like highest moments. I really wish the band would have kept going because the sound that they get on this record is so great. I mean, it kind of starts with Morrison Hotel, but then really matures with this record with so many great tracks. Love Her Madly is just amazing. Obviously, LA Woman is amazing, but Riders on the Storm is really for me, the Doors track. It probably is. When I think back to what was the very first Doors track I ever heard, I think Riders of the Storm was it. And it's interesting because it comes along when I was learning how to play the drums. In fact, it actually goes back to 2 years before I started playing the drums. And it was kind of one of the influences. My dad's friend's son was also a drummer, and he had a drum set, and he was learning how to play Riders on the Storm on the drum set. And I remember he had a beautiful ride cymbal, and I remember him learning how to play it and just watching him. And it was one of the things that just really inspired me to ever want to get into music at all. So that track is like the pinnacle Doors track, in my opinion. It's probably my favorite Doors track. If I had to really pick one track, it's really awesome. It's kind of cheesy in the movie when they talk about it and they're saying we added some Storm to Riders. But again, the sound of it on this record, the silence of this vinyl, it treats it so well. And Kevin Gray's mastering of this is just amazing. I mean, this whole thing, I mean, there's, all the sounds that you get on Love Her Madly are just awesome. And all of the extra sounds that you're getting from the keyboards and the organs and everything, it's just very, very pronounced on this record. So I would highly recommend this. This is another one that has a lot of audiophile pressings out there. There is the 45 RPM edition that's cut by Doug Sachs that was put out by Analog Productions. Analog Productions also just put out another one this year, a UHQR that's done by Bernie Grundman. And then we have this one, which is done by Kevin Gray. Now, this is going to be the most affordable when it comes out on the individual ones. And I would argue that it's probably one of the best ones to get if you're not really that much into the Doors. I would highly suggest getting the Kevin Gray cut of this, but I'm sure that the Bernie Grundman sounds amazing. What's cool with that one is you do get the rounded, cornered original jacket, which the jacket on this one is like a lithograph, and it kind of comes out where the band, I think the yellow copy of this is from the inlay. It does have the original inlay cover, and I think that's what the yellow. So the original cover for this was not I don't believe was a gatefold. I think it was just that pull-out version from this. So the UHQR represents that really well, or you can go out and get the 45 edition, or if you want to save a couple bucks but still get an awesome audiophile quality version, you could get this one when it's available in the unnumbered copies. So that does it for the box set, but I wasn't done with more boxes from Rhino High Fidelity this year, because I really love the Doors, and I've never had all this stuff on vinyl, so I figured to me, hey, why not go and get this? And this live in Detroit kind of caught my attention as one of there were only 4 things that I wanted from this year's Record Store Day, Black Friday. And when I went to High Fidelity, which is the local record store that I go to in Westchester, PA, they did have this, and it was the last one. So it was kind of like, and I didn't wake up early in the morning to go either. I actually didn't get there until like 10:15 or 10:30 or something like that. I slept in and I went there and I was like, all right, I'll just try and go get this. But they had it. And once I saw it, I had to go get it. And it definitely went up in price afterwards. I do not know or think that it's worth the price that it's going for. This is the Doors live in Detroit from May of 1970. This is a 4 LP set that comes in this cool clamshell box set, and this is cut from original master tapes from Bernie Grundman. This is what the hype sticker literally says. Recorded May 8th, 1970 at the Cobo Arena in Detroit, Michigan. One of the longest Doors shows ever caught on tape, which includes a 17-minute version of The End, a real rarity among recorded live shows, available for the first time ever on vinyl. Right away, the fact that this is the first time ever on vinyl was one of the reasons I wanted to get it, and the fact that it's a Bernie Grundman cut from the original master tapes. And I am very familiar with this show. As I've stated numerous times, I've seen this movie a billion times, and I'm pretty sure in this movie, like, they reference a lot of this show. In the beginning of this, when it starts out, you get tuning, and then you get a vamp of Roadhouse Blues, and they go to basically like a stop moment. And in this movie, you see a lot of that where Morrison's just getting more and more, drunk or high off of heroin or whatever. And he's just, he would just stop playing in the middle of a show. And like everyone in the band just gets like totally disappointed and pissed at him. Like they're just looking at him like, dude, what the hell? Like, we just want to play the show. Like, why don't you shut up? And he literally starts saying hello to like every city out there. And he's only in Detroit, but he starts like saying hello to Dallas, hello to Phoenix, hello to Philadelphia, hello to every single, like he literally mentions like 12 cities. And it started to even get annoying to me. And so it immediately took me to the moments in this movie where you can see John Densmore, who in this movie is played by a young Kevin Dillon, which is very cool. And he basically gets super pissed. And you can hear it in this record when he starts out what is labeled on this record as Dead Cats and Dead Rats, which is really just Break On Through from the Other Side, but it's just Morrison, freaking out with lyrics all over this thing and like, going crazy in the arena and getting for people to freak out with this Dead Cats, Dead Rats saying. there's probably some political overtones to that Dead Cats, Dead Rats, and there's probably some things that other people would know about. If you know more about that stuff, let me know in the comments, or definitely comment below about what more insights you might have into that. But what I find interesting is in this movie, you really see it. You see John Densmore like just start the song as like a real like, F you, Jim, I'm just going to start playing Break On Through. I'm sick of you doing this. Let's just actually play the song. And it comes through on this record. Like you really hear him like just get into that beginning beat, and it's fast, and it just sounds angry. And then Jim kind of responds with that Dead Cats, Dead Rats, and they kind of like play that for a little bit. But then when they finally hit into Break On Through on this, it sounds awesome. And when they are on in this record and in this live show, it is fantastic. I mean, the 17-minute version of When the Music's Over on this is really cool. It takes up a whole side, and you never get that feeling of like, oh, this is just going on too long. It is just balls to the wall the entire time. So it sounds really great. But again, if you have not seen this movie, I would highly recommend seeing this movie, and also, you know, getting this record and kind of like feeling this moment, or even just listening to this record, because I know that this has been out there on CD before. This is only just the first time that it's out there on vinyl, but it's portrayed in this movie, and I'm pretty sure they got banned from Detroit ever for playing there ever again. They were banned from a lot of the places that they were able to go play in. Like Jim Morrison did a lot of bad stuff on stage, but I think it was mainly because they played for so long in this set, and it just totally went past any of the sound ordinances that were allowed to be had at the arena that they were at. What's also awesome is side D of this: People Get Ready, Mystery Train, Away in India, Crossroads, and Carol. All of these songs are ones that I've never really heard ever from The Doors. They are not on that box set on any of those 6 tracks from there. So this is 1970. You know, this is like right around the Morrison Hotel era and getting into LA Woman time. But again, this is a really cool live set to have, and I would highly recommend it if you're into any live stuff. I'm not usually that into live records when it comes to live vinyl, but this is a good one to have. It's recorded really well, and it's mixed down really well and mastered perfectly from Bernie Grundman. I was definitely happy with this. And also, it's very silent, you know, I mean, a great pressing as well. So they did a good job with this one. I would definitely go check it out when you get a chance. All right, to wrap this up here, I am extremely grateful as a Doors fan that Rhino made these, to be able to have the entire catalog of the band in one go, all of the records exactly the same. I mean, as a vinyl collector, that's exactly what you're looking for in a collection of things. They all have the same Obi strip, they're all put out by the same mastering, they're all done from the original master tapes. And then to add on this live set as well is just like a cherry on top. And so I'm done now. Like, I have all of the Doors records that I would ever want. Maybe if one day they put out a cool version of Absolutely Live, I might go and consider that one. But really, for the most part, I'm done now with the Doors. Like, this is pretty much all I'm ever going to get. I'm not going to go out and get all of the 45 editions. I really highly considered those prior to this coming out. And I think back in 2012, if I was like out there looking for the entire box set back then, I probably would have done that to be able to get the entire Infinite box set with the box with it. But at this point, I'm not really interested in getting just the individual ones on 45. I actually do prefer these on 33. I mean, it was nice to just be able to put them on and let them play all the way through, you know, like as I remember them being. I mean, I listened to these mostly on CDs when I was listening to them growing up. But to be able to have the entire set here and all of them cut by Kevin Gray and Bernie Grundman, it's just fantastic. Now, if you're still here at this point, you probably enjoyed this video, which means you're probably gonna like some other videos on this channel. Now, YouTube thinks you're gonna like this one right here, but if you don't want YouTube to choose for you, you can watch some of these other ones here also. I highly recommend all of them. I will see you on the next one.